Okay, we are recording. So tell me your full name that you were born with.
Oh, Geraldine Leota Pittenger.
And what day were you born? What was your birthday and year?
January 14th, 1928,
And where were you born?
in Chicago.
In Chicago. Were you born in a hospital or
I
at
was
home?
born in the hospital.
Was that rare at that time?
Well, they had just moved to Chicago, and I guess they didn't know where to go, so but I was born in Chicago.
And were you the oldest, or what order were you in your family?
I'm number 3, the first girl, but number 3.
And so who were your two older siblings?
The 2 boys were born in Mason City, Iowa, and Billy was born in a hospital, and of course he has cerebral palsy. Duane was born at home, and then they moved here.
And then you?
And I was born in a hospital. Patty was born at home.
Okay.
Alvin was born at home. Lynette and Vicky were born in the hospital.
So what do you think was your first memory?
My first memory, when Dad came in the house and told me we had a new baby.
And how old were you
Well,
then?
I was probably 2.
Oh, wow, so you go way back then.
2, yeah. Pat was born, yeah. I was
And
born.
what are your parents' names?
My dad is William Otis, and my mother is Louise Osborne.
All right.
Louise Agnes Osborne.
So you have your first memory when you were about 2, so 1930.
Yeah.
What are your memories of the Great Depression? What stands out to you as someone that really grew up as a child during that historical era?
I remember that before school started, we'd go to the store to get our clothes, and we'd get 3 outfits. That lasted us all year long, 3 outfits. If we were lucky, maybe we would get another one at Christmas time.
What type of outfits would you wear? Dresses?
Oh, dresses. Oh, definitely. You couldn't wear slacks. Those were for boys.
Did you ever wear slacks when you were a kid?
No.
No? How old were you when you think you wore slacks for the first time?
Well, in high school, you still had to wear skirts. And then finally, just before I got out of high school, like probably sophomore or junior year, Friday was the day you could wear slacks.
Oh, all right. Casual Friday, even back then.
Yeah. But of course, Dad didn't, you're a girl, you don't wear slacks. So
Right.
I very rarely got to wear slacks.
So so you were born in Chicago in 1928, but where did you end up growing up?
In Sauganash Park, I started school, and I got to 3rd grade, and then they skipped me to 4th, and then we moved, and 4th grade I had whooping cough, and they told me I had to do it over again, so I really didn't, then
Evened out?
And then when finished 4th grade, we moved to Palatine, and they wanted to skip me before I moved to Palatine, and again, they wouldn't skip me because I moved to Palatine, and this was a little country schoolhouse with 1 teacher and 11 kids.
And were all the kids different ages?
All 8 grades, all in the same room.
No. What did you think of that?
Well, I didn't learn anything then, because the teacher wasn't really a good teacher. She had a boyfriend, and we'd start school at 9 o'clock, and maybe 9:15 or 9:30 she'd let us have recess up until 11:30. And then she'd call us in, and then at 12 o'clock we'd have lunch, and so on and so forth. So, she wasn't a good teacher. And this was a 1-room country schoolhouse with 2 outhouses.
Oh, outhouses.
Yes,
Oh,
outhouses. Well, I had an outhouse till I got married. So I know what they're all about. You didn't use toilet paper in the outhouse because that would get wet, but we had catalogs. Sears catalog and Montgomery Ward catalog. Montgomery Ward was far superior catalog because it was softer than Sears.
Whatever works. So after Palatine, where did you live after that? Where did your family move after Palatine? Or were you there
I was there till I got married.
You got married, okay.
So I had an outhouse till I got married.
And so you're in Palatine, you're going to this 1-room schoolhouse in the 1930s. What other things about the 1930s stand out to you?
I remember when Roosevelt and Landon, when Roosevelt was trying to get in, and Landon was there too, and there were sort of poetry that went on, at that time. I remember Dad taking us to the World's Fair in Chicago at that time, and Patty getting lost. Of course, they found her, and that was really about it. I mean, Dad would take, and just before the war started, or the day it started, it was around Christmas time. It was, December 7th, and it was a weekend, and Dad was off that weekend, so we all went downtown and looked at the Christmas displays in the stores. Of course, the stores were closed by that time because he wasn't going to let us go in anyhow. But we'd walk, and then we'd hear the paper boys yelling, "Extra, extra, war declared," so on.
No, yeah. So my next question was, what do you remember about Pearl Harbor? So you would have been.
I was actually 13 because it was December, and in January I would have been 14.
So before Pearl Harbor, though, so World War II started in Europe in 1939. Did you ever hear anything about that or remember anything hearing about that?
We never got the newspaper to that extent, and Mom wouldn't let us have the radio on because we had one radio, and there was always a baby sleeping, so the only time we'd ever have the radio on was when my mother decided we could have it on, although from, I think, 4:30 until 7, there were 15-minute programs, Tom Mix and Jack Armstrong and Little Orphan Annie and stuff like that. So we would do that.
So 1941 and Pearl Harbor happens, so
Yeah.
you're 13 years old, and what do you remember about World War II on the home front? Do you remember any rationing or anything that affected your daily life? What was it like?
Well, my family, we had, ration coupons, and the Barches, which ended up being my sister's in-laws eventually, they liked coffee. So we would switch, change coupons, the ones that you didn't want to use, you give somebody else and they'd give you yours and so on. And of course, and then when the war was going on, I'd gotten a job at the Jewel Tea Factory in Barrington, and we packed K rations for servicemen overseas. And my job was it was a line, and you put your stuff in as the line went on. And so one day I put my name and address on a piece of cardboard in the box, and we'll see what happens. So a little later, a few months later, I get a letter from William Flying Horse, and he was overseas. I think he was in Germany at that time, but I don't know. So it was a very nice letter. So I wrote him back, and about 3 months later, my letter was returned, killed in action.
Aww.
And boy, that shook me like you wouldn't believe, because it was my first time I ran into a death. Even though I never met the man, it shook me up.
Yeah.
So I always remembered that one.
So during World War II, were you old enough to follow politics and the politics of the war?
We never had politics in the house because we didn't get the paper too often, and my mother, there was always a babies in the house, so we didn't have the radio that much. So what politics I got was a little here and a little there, but the neighbor girl, Gert Barch, her father was in the World War I in Germany, and she said one day as we were coming home from school, she said she hoped the Japs beat us up, and I held her under the creek, in the water in the creek. Adam thinks that's so funny.
Grandma. Gotta do what you gotta do, right?
Well,
It's a time of war.
They had. Well, this is my country. Don't talk bad about my country.
Yeah.
So that was it.
You're a bad grandma. So do you remember the day the war ended?
There was one in the fall and one in the spring.
Well, so the first one was, so the first one was in the beginning of May when Germany surrenders.
Yeah, and
do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember, but I don't remember that much because I wasn't that interested because it wasn't affecting me personally at that time.
And then 3 months later was the Japanese surrender.
Was it? Yeah.
In August.
Okay.
August 14th and 15th. So do you remember that by any chance?
Yeah, I remember everybody hugging and kissing everybody and stuff like that.
So you would have been, in 1945, you would have been, math is hard.
14, 15, 16.
16. So
16.
Do you?
Yeah, I remember going downtown because when I was 16, I got a job at the jewel factory, and every payday I went downtown. I got on the train and went downtown and spent money, and of course, at the train station it was filled with servicemen, and so you'd talk to some of them, and see them, and that was about it.
Yeah. So what about, those 5 years, after the war, the rest of the 40s, what was life like for you? What did you do in those years?
Well, let's see, the war was over when I was a junior in high school.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And then they laid me off at the jewel factory because they didn't, unless I would go back unless I wanted to finish school. If I quit school, I had to work full time. So I said, no, I want to finish school. So they laid me off. So then I got a job at the jewel tea factory, at the telephone company in Arlington Heights.
And what was that job like? Like, what did that entail, working at the phone company? Were you an operator?
I was an operator.
And so what was that like? Because I'm putting context for people in 2020 who have no idea what phones were like in the 40s.
There's a telephone. I took Isaiah and Sharon one time to this Gridley Telephone Museum in Gridley, Illinois, which is near. It's off of Dwight, in that area. So you can check that out and see if it's still going, because they had all sorts of telephones in there. You pick up the back cord. You plug it in and you say, number please. Then you pick up the second cord and they give you the number, and then you plug it into whatever number.
When did that all go away? Do you remember?
Well, when I got out of school, I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I left and then came in because I wanted to go to Chicago, because I wanted to live in Chicago. I mean, Palatine had nothing to offer me. I mean, Palatine now is great, but at that time there was nothing there for me. And it was just one of those, I mean, it was 2 miles out of town. I had no car. I had to walk back, walk to the train station to get a train into the city. And coming home, I had to walk 2 miles home. And so that was my life for a while.
So when did you move into the city?
When I got married.
And so tell me about that. When did you meet Grandpa?
I met him the first Wednesday after Thanksgiving. That was our first date. He was working he had gotten a job.
In what year? What year?
1949.
Okay.
And he asked me out, and I said no. And he asked me out again, and I said no. I had a boyfriend, and then finally he asked me out. And what happened? How I met him is he was 5 or 6 desks away from me, and I write with both hands. And here I'm writing and checking off, and he'd come and look, and he went to like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm just doing my job." So that's basically how we got started. So then when he did ask me out and finally said okay, he decided, we're not going to take the same elevator down because there's nobody's business what we're going to do. So I'll meet you here at such and such a place. So, and of course it was in the field building downtown. So our first date, he took me to Lion Healy, which is a music place, and he rented a small room, and he played the piano for me, which thought that was very nice. And then we went to dinner and a movie.
Do you remember the movie?
It was about a black girl that pretended she was white. I forgot. Pinky.
Okay.
I think it was Pinky, yeah. And when we went out to eat, he said, I don't remember what I had, but he says, "You're looking on the wrong side. You're supposed to look at what we're having, not the price." So then he took me. Then after that, I had to get the train to come home. So we got to the Northwestern Station, and he said, "Can you lend me 50 cents?" And I said, 50 cents? He says, "Yeah, I spent all my money and I don't have car fare to get home." So I gave him 50 cents. Next morning at work, he said, "Did you have a nice time?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "You want to go out again?" I said, "No." He said, "Why?" I said, "You owe me 50 cents. Because at one time before that, I had dated another fella, and I gave him some money because he needed it one time, and I never got it back. So I'm very cautious about who I give money to.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm gonna raise up the camera a bit more. You can keep talking. So when did you go out with him again?
Well, then we started going out every so often. I mean, quite frequently, because this was the first Wednesday after Thanksgiving we went out. So we went out a couple times, and he said, "Let's go meet my mother, and we'll tell her we're going to get married." And
He just
so
said that?
So we went to meet his mother, and she lived on a third floor, I think, or second or third floor. And we got up the back stairways, and he said, "There's something I need to tell you." And I said, "Oh?" He says, "I'm Jewish." I said, "So what does that mean?"
Was he really nervous about it, you think?
Evidently, he had some problems with being Jewish, yeah. And so I met his mother. Was not, and she said, "Melvin always went out with pretty girls before."
Oh, that's a great way to start that, huh?
My mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyhow, I mean, I didn't say anything about that. And then after we did get married, we were going to go out to Wakanda to go swimming with my parents and the kids. And he said, "I can't go there." I said, "Why?" He says, "It's restricted."
Oh, they wouldn't let Jews there?
Uh-huh. And I says, "Well, we won't tell him, and you're going to be with us anyhow." So he did go, but he was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
With it. Yeah.
It's a sign of the times.
I mean, I had never encountered stuff like that, because my mother and father had a Jewish friend, and she was just there,
Yeah.
So I never thought about that. I never thought about anybody not liking somebody because they're black or green or purple or blue or Irish or whatever,
Yeah.
Because I'm such a mix. You name it, I got it.
So what day and year did you get married?
1950.
And what was your wedding anniversary date? Like what month and day?
Oh, January 28th, 1950.
And then when was Sharon born?
9 months and 10 days later. I mean, we were going to wait a while, and it didn't work out that well. And I had gone to Planned Parenthood just before I got married, so I don't know what happened, but something happened.
Didn't work.
And so Sharon was born November 9th, and I got married on January 28th.
And what was that like, having a kid in the 1950s? Like, did you read Dr. Spock's parenting book?
Oh, hey, oh yeah, that was very good. I had read that a long time ago. And there was another book that I read that was called Childbirth Without Fear. It's still on the market too. Mm-hmm. It is the best book I ever read. It taught you how to relax, and I had all natural childbirth. You know, I never had a...
What do you think is different, the most different thing between having a baby in the 1950s versus having a baby in the 2000s?
Well, then you had to stay in bed for 10 days or a week. And it just wasn't it. I mean, nowadays they push you out of the hospital. You couldn't do anything like that.
Yeah. And so Sharon was born in 1951.
Sharon was born in 1950.
Oh, 1950. Get my years mixed up. And then you have Linda.
Linda was born in 54, I think.
Yep.
And Robbie in 57 and Shirley in 59.
And so you're all the 50s for you.
The 50s were all my,
having kids. So would you say you were a typical housewife in the 50s?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, like you did the whole stay at home?
Mel never, or very rarely, ever took out the garbage. He never cleaned off the table or anything. I mean, unless if he was there by himself, he would put dishes in the sink. But if he wasn't there, it was my job. Did
that bother you? The gender roles of the 50s?
At that time, it was a very normal thing. So my biggest argument with Mel was he wouldn't go out and work. He wouldn't look for a job, and the easiest way out was, I mean, our credit rating at that time was unbelievably bad. I mean, now I'm up to an 850 credit rating. So I'm good.
So you have 4 kids in the 50s, and then the 60s come along. But let's stay in the 50s for a minute.
Okay.
When was the first time you voted for president? What was your first presidential election that you voted in?
Oh, I don't remember. I voted in every presidential election, but I don't remember which one.
So, if you were born in 28, you would have been 21 in what year? 28, 38, 48. Did you vote in the 1954 election?
I voted in every election that came along, and I don't remember who I voted for. I mean, who was in charge at that time.
Do you remember your first, the first president you did vote for, though? Like, did you vote for JFK? Did you vote for Johnson? Did you vote?
Well, Roosevelt. So it must have been Truman, probably.
Truman, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember when Roosevelt died. In fact, during the war, my mother was working at the telephone in Arlington Heights. And during the war, we had prisoners of war walking down the street in front of the telephone company, going back and forth to where they had to work that day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Like German prisoners of war that they had
brought
over?
German prisoners of war.
Oh, that's really interesting. Like, did you ever see them outside of that capacity?
No, in fact, they were housed over in Arlington Heights, right where near where the hospital was. There was an Air Force base there before O'Hare. I couldn't get it all. And when during the war, the planes would fly over our house, and one time a plane flew over the house. 2 of them collided, and my sister Lynette saw them fall to the ground.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, Lynette has seen unbelievable, terrible things. I have never seen things like that. I mean, I saw my very first accident about 2 years ago, believe it or not.
Like car accident?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was just...
Fender bender.
But it was just like, oh my, Lynette was driving to Missouri one day when she was pregnant. She stopped to get gas, and let one of our kids go to the bathroom or something like that. And while she was there, someone was changing their tire, and it was an electric pump or something, and it flew off and cut the guy's head off. And of course, by the time she got to where Mom and Dad were, she wasn't feeling too good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. She has seen some very bad stuff.
So in the 50s, so let me backtrack. So we were talking about Truman, and I think I said the election of 54. I meant 52. But what did you think of Truman or Eisenhower? Did you follow politics in the 50s as an adult?
I knew who was going to go in, yeah, and Truman got it by default.
Right.
I have since read Mrs. Truman's book,
yeah,
which was very good. Eisenhower was all right, but I wasn't that impressed with him.
Really?
Kennedy, of course, was big.
And so in 1960, did you vote for Kennedy or did you vote for Nixon?
Oh, I voted for Kennedy.
What did you like about Kennedy at that time?
He had a good reputation at that time, and Nixon always looked. He was frowning all the time.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, he just didn't look happy.
Well, he was a paranoid man, so paranoid people typically don't look very happy. So in the 1950s, did you watch TV? Like, what type of TV? Did you watch TV shows?
We didn't have a television until almost 60.
So when,
in fact, let's see, all four of my kids were born in the 50s. Robbie was 5 or 6 when we got our first television.
Oh, okay, so not until the 60s.
Yeah, it was in the 60s.
So let's go into the 60s then. So you have kids, you spend the 50s being a housewife, raising kids, right. doing all that. And now you get into the 60s, you get a TV, and JFK is president. Do you remember when JFK was assassinated?
Oh, yeah.
And do you remember like where you were? What was that like?
I was in the house doing dishes. The kids were watching television, and all of a sudden I heard that he got shot.
Yeah.
So that was a big shock, because I mean I just didn't think about it. In fact.
Yeah. So the 60s. So what did you think of the 60s culturally? Because when you look at American history in the 1900s, the 60s stands out as its own special decade. So what to you, if you could explain the 60s in just a couple words to sum up what the 60s were like for you?
Well, in the 60s, when Shirley was 5, 6 years old, that's when I went to work in the beauty shop with Mel. So that was sort of the end of the stuff, because the kids after school, they would either come to the beauty shop or stay home, whatever, depending on what they wanted to do, or what we wanted them to do in many cases. And I going into the beauty industry was not my idea. It was something that I could care less about, but I got talked into it, so that was it. And then, of course, Mel became a competition artist, and once we won, he stopped. That was it. He felt he was at the top, he couldn't do any better, and he went downhill. And everything he ever did, the same thing. He could not, to me, there was a ceiling where he hit it and he wouldn't go any further.
Yeah. Did that bother you?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you stop trying, there's only one way to go, and that's downhill. And we went downhill. So at that time, I was seriously considering leaving him, and but he couldn't handle it on himself, so I went back.
So in the 60s, do you remember doing all the big hairdos? Would you guys do that at the beauty shop? What was the type of things that women would ask for in the beauty shop in the 60s?
Well, whatever was popular, of course. And since Mel was the artist, I mean, he and Mario Tricocci were competitors. I had you name that hairdo, I had it. I mean, when I was, it really never bothered me about my hair was getting gray, because I was about 32 at that time. And when he got into the business, I thought, gee, frosting is very popular nowadays. Maybe I should get my hair frosted. So Mel said, you won't like it. So I said, oh yeah, I will, so on and so forth. So he frosted my hair, and I looked like my grandmother. So of course I didn't like it. So I said, what do I do? So one morning I got up, I was polishing the kids' shoes, and there's the black shoe polish. Well, black shoe polish on frosted hair turned your hair green. The frosting turned green. I shampooed my hair, I put kitchen cleanser on my hair, I put all sorts of stuff. And when he came home that night, I had my hair in a turban, and he laughed. And so that's basically when I started going into hair color, because then I became a blonde. And as a blonde, did not look good at all. And then we went through to red hair like Rob. And I was redhead for many years, and then as the red began to turn orange as I was getting older and getting more gray, then I became a blonde, and it was okay then.
Then it worked for you later?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So in the 60s, do you remember anything about the Vietnam War? Did you follow that at all?
I remember about the war, but I never, since I wasn't involved with a lot of this, and it was overseas, I just figured, well, it happens, and of course, you learn of the neighbors that died in it, but I didn't know that many of them, and I wasn't involved with a lot of stuff. So the war was there, and that was it. I remember the Korean War a little bit.
Oh yes, I did want to ask about that.
Yeah.
What are your memories of the Korean War?
That's when Normie got in.
Yeah.
Normie was Mel's best friend. And when the Korean War started, Normie was also very much like Mel insofar as take the easy way out. So for some reason he decided to go into service. He never ended up going overseas. He was stationed in Kansas or Missouri or something for the whole time. And he came home one time, and of course he stayed with us. And I had my 25th birthday when he was staying with us. So on my 25th birthday, I got 25 kisses from Normie. He kissed me a few times, and he said, I gotta walk around the block. And this was going, so, I mean, I had to laugh because I wasn't thinking about anything about that. And Normie, when we first got married, he told me, what are you getting married for? You don't need, because he never did get married in his whole life. But after he finally left, and of course, later on, many years later, I did take a trip to California, and while I was there, I stopped and saw Normie. I spent the night with Normie. He had a couch. He slept on one couch. There was a coffee table between us, and I slept on the other one. So when I came home, I told him, I said, I guess who I spent the night with. And Mel was a little uncomfortable. He didn't say anything bad, but he was uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, I can understand that. All right, so let's go to the 1970s. So what are your thoughts on Nixon, Carter, the fashion of the 70s, the
Carter
music?
I thought was very nice because it was just, he was a nice person. In fact, I've met Jimmy Carter.
Yep.
And
he is a nice person.
He was a very nice person. Sometimes you want somebody that maybe isn't so nice to be in charge, because nice people sometimes let you get away with stuff.
Yeah.
So when he was, he was our one single term president.
Yeah. In the 70s, and in really the 60s or the 50s too, did you listen to any popular music, or like what type of music did you like?
That's a sore subject. When I got my first job, and of course we only had one radio in the house, and I was in high school, so I went out and bought myself a radio, a phonograph, radio. Bought myself a record, put the record in, pulled it out, and dropped the record and broke the record. I remember Keely Smith, and she was paired up with another guy, which I can't remember his name now. But if I would turn on the radio at night, even low. Remember, we lived in a tiny house, 20 by 24. And my mother always had babies, so it was turn that thing off, turn it off. So I had this radio, I couldn't even use it.
So as an adult, did you like music then? Did you listen to music then?
Well, I couldn't use. Well, at that time when I got married, I couldn't have music on because Mel would play the piano, and when he was sleeping, I couldn't have music on because it would bother him. So I never had any. I mean, I have classical music on now all the time in my all night long. But I mean, I let him, rather than have him pout and feel like a jerk all the time. I figured it wasn't worth it.
Gotta pick your battles, right?
Huh?
Pick your battles. So what did you think of the Beatles?
They did not impress me. And the music of today, I think, is terrible.
So when your kids were growing up, would they listen to music? Did you hate it? What did you think?
They had their own room and they would listen to music. Yeah, I mean it was what they wanted, and it didn't bother me. I don't particularly like what they, but I realize that, hey, that's what it is. Like even now today, the stuff that I see on television or stuff. The only thing I watch on television is game shows now, and some of them are really bad too.
There's some bad stuff out there today. In the 70s, so let's see, so Shirley would have been the youngest, so she would have been, 11 when the 70s started. So you still have young kids throughout the 70s. What were you doing for work? What was your life like in the 70s?
Let's see, we moved out here in 77, I think, so before we moved out here, of course, we had the beauty salon, and we got rid of that. And I'd gotten a job in Evanston in the Methodist Board of Pensions, which I stayed for about a year and a half.
And what were you doing there?
Just office work, no big deal. But that was my first introduction to computers.
So what did you think of computers then?
Well, I had no idea how to use it. I wasn't using a computer, but there were times when you had to write out, spell stuff. Oh, I'm a good speller, so I would spell it and I would get it wrong. They said it was wrong because it wasn't spelled the way the computer wanted, because the computer had to do it a certain way. So I stayed there for a year and then I quit it. And then of course we moved out here, and we moved. And I worked at a beauty salon out here a couple times, and finally I decided it's not worth it. So that's when I went to work at Market Square. So I was there for a while, and then I found out that I could get benefits if I worked 15 hours at JCPenney. So I got the job at JCPenney, and I worked days at JCPenney and nights at Market Square. So I was putting an 80-hour week for about 5 or 6, 7 years.
Did you like that?
Well, you do what you have to do. On my breaks at JCPenney, I would go into the bathroom, sit on the couch. I had a watch with a timer on it, and I would set the timer for 15 minutes and sleep. And people would come in and say, "Is she okay?" Yeah. So I learned how to take my naps and get up and go back to work. And then J.C. Penney closed down, or that particular office did. Then I worked full time at Market Square. But I was working full time at Market Square anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
I worked from 5 in the afternoon until 2 in the morning, and then at 5 in the morning, I'd go to J.C. Penney.
And how long did you work at Market Square? Till what year?
I worked till 82 at Market Square. That was 28 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
And I got a good send-off from Market Square. Around Christmas time, they said, "When are you going to quit?" Because I was getting up there. And I said, "I'll let you know." So in January was my birthday, and I was 82 then, and I'd started at Market Square in March. So I said, "I'm going to quit in March." I said, "Then I'll be there for 28 years." So in March I quit. The day I quit, they gave me, the girls that I worked with gave me an envelope with some money in it. The customers also had an envelope with money in it. And my boss and his wife gave me $200.
Wow.
I mean, it was a nice send-off. I mean, it was good. I mean, I worked there. I mean, I was no big deal, I did my own thing.
What's the biggest lesson you learned from waiting tables and working with the public?
Well, I've worked with the public really most of my life, even with the telephone companies.
What have you learned the most from people in that type of position?
You learn the most that you don't say too much. I mean, you smile and say, "That's nice."
That's good advice. Okay, so throughout the 70s, you're working, you're busy. Shirley's growing up, so
Yeah.
Shirley will be a teenager throughout the 1970s. But the rest of your kids are starting to grow up and move out, right?
Yeah, well,
So when did Sharon get married to Jake? Do you remember what year?
Sharon got married, she was 23, 22, 23. And Linda got married several times. Linda was always followed a lot of things, and whoever she was with, that's who she turned into. She went out with this guy who liked loud music and stuff like that, so she liked it. Then she went out with this other guy who likes. And Linda started ice skating. She was a good ice skater, but she went out with this guy Bob. Bob didn't ice skate, so Linda stopped ice skating.
Bob Flores?
Yeah. She didn't ice, so she stopped ice skating.
So stick with it.
I
She
mean,
could have gone to the Olympics.
She learned. Whoever she was with is who she turned into, even all of her life. I mean, even as a little girl. And but she doesn't know who she is.
Before Sharon met Jake, what type of boyfriends did Sharon have?
I have no idea. I know Sharon was in an accident once, because when she got out of high school, and we still lived in Chicago, she, I encouraged her to go to school, finish school. So she went to Wright Junior College. Her father decided, my poor girl can't take the bus there all the time, so he bought her a car. Big mistake, because she would get in the car to go to school. She'd pick up all of her friends, and they'd all goof off someplace. And so she never didn't go to school, basically. And then one day, Mel had gone to California, I think, for whatever, or someplace. He was gone anyhow. And I get a telephone call. Sharon was in an accident. she, I suspect she probably was drunk, I'm not sure, but she sideswiped another car, a parked car, nobody got hurt. So that was Sharon. And at the time, I mean, Mel and I always fought over the way the kids were being raised. Or I fought over it because the kids, Sharon in particular, could do no wrong. Could do no wrong. I mean, she was perfect. And I mean, she was a hippie. And
so what did you think of hippies in general of the time, at that time?
I was not impressed with them. To me, people talk too much. Hippies made it very obvious what they were. I mean, to me, if I'm gonna go someplace, I'm not gonna dress like a clown so everybody knows who I am. I'm gonna dress a little bit underdressed, you know, so it's nobody's business what I do. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff in my lifetime, and people don't understand. I mean, they don't know what I've done, and I'm not going to tell them.
Well, you feel free to tell us whatever you want. Some of the weird stuff you've done. That's totally fine to talk about.
Yeah.
So Sharon, let's see. So Sharon must have gotten married. I mean, Morgan would have been born in 77, right? Because Adam was born in 78.
Yeah, she was born.
So did Sharon and Jake get married in 76, probably?
No, Sharon did not get pregnant right away.
So they were married a couple years then. So they got married in the early 70s.
Yeah.
What was your initial reaction when you met Jake? What did you think of him?
Well, I didn't really. I mean, Jake was okay. I mean, I couldn't understand what she'd see in him, but I didn't understand what he saw in her either. So it was one of those crazy situations.
So what was it like when your kids start having kids? Did you like being a grandma when they would have kids?
I never had the opportunity to be a grandma because the kids did not live near here. And when Shirley and Dan got married, and I was working, you know, so many hours, Shirley asked me one day if I would watch John on every Monday, and I said no. I said I can't. I said it's my only day off, and I said I can watch him on occasion, but I think I watched John once or twice, and that's it. So I mean, I never had the opportunity to become a grandma as a grandma.
Yeah.
And my mother never did either because I shouldn't say she never did because when Linda was born, Sharon was out there for the week because at that time you had to stay a week in the hospital. And then when Linda was born, we had someone come into the house and watch the kids while his name was Mark. Mel was driving a cab at that time. And so and Sharon had started kindergarten. I think she started kindergarten, but anyhow, when I came home from the hospital, the sink was filled with dishes, the table was dirty, and Mel had not done anything with Sharon. He kept her home the whole week because he didn't know how to dress her. I mean, Mel never changed a diaper in his whole life. One time when some girls and I went to a movie, and Robbie was still an infant. I came home from the movie. He met me at the door. Mel met me at the door. Robbie pooped in his pants, and I can't do anything about it. He would not change. I had to take my son with this dirty diaper and clean him up. Yeah.
Oh, man.
I mean, Mel did not make life easy for me. I mean, he was good to me in his own way, but that was it. And we go out to eat. He loved to go out to eat. We go to the same place over and over and over and over again. He'd order the same stuff. I understand that must be it's a man thing because I've heard a lot of people say the same thing.
We just can't understand. So, the 70s are happening, you're being a grandma, you're becoming a grandma, your kids are growing up, having kids. Now the 80s come along. And Shirley would be...
Oh, Shirley was married by
Yeah,
then.
like, she got married in 84,
Yeah, because
right?
I mean, I retired, 80, yeah. I'm thinking at my age, I'm thinking 80,
So,
yeah.
let me go to 1980. The year, did you vote for Ronald Reagan? Do you remember?
Who was the couple?
So, it would have been Reagan in 1980 and Carter.
No, I think I voted for Carter.
For Carter. What did you think of Reagan in the 80s? Did you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I liked Reagan. I thought he was very, very nice. But that, I never really got into heavy duty politics to that extent. I was raised as a Democrat, and most of my time I voted as a Democrat. Once or twice I switched, but it was just one of those things.
So in the 80s, your kids are grown up, doing their own thing. What was your life like then in the 80s? With now empty nest, kids are gone.
In the 80s, so then I lived out here then, so it was very, very, well, it was normal, except that Mel still would not work. He didn't feel like he had to work. I mean, he was a dispatcher for the cab company for a while, but then he died and he decided, and then when he did drive a cab, he was supposed to go from 6 at night till 6 in the morning. He'd start out at 8 at night, and at 12 o'clock he'd stop in a restaurant and they'd have coffee till 4 in the morning, and then he'd come home, and it was a slow night. I mean, how many slow nights can you have before you decide this job is not for me?
Yeah.
I mean...
You were pretty active in the 80s though, right? You rode your bike a lot and you were...
Oh yeah, we did the...
Pack racks?
Did you go pack rack
I did
one time?
Well, yeah, in the 90s though. I would have been 12 or so probably.
Well, I think Harlan did.
Harlan did them.
She did with pack rack with me one time, yeah.
Yeah.
And Jim did it once too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was always fun. So throughout the 80s, you were pretty active. Like you stayed busy.
Well, I mean, if you stop and figure, Mel died 27 years ago.
Right, 93?
In 93, yeah. So, I mean, and I had just given up on trying to have him do anything. He didn't do anything. He practically gave up playing the piano. And then when he did die, he'd gone to the hospital several times, and they finally had to do a trach on him. And in later years, as I thought about it, I should have told the doctor no, because he loved to talk. Yeah. And that sort of ended it for him.
What ultimately killed him? What ultimately put him in the hospital and made him so sick?
He went into the hospital for several. He went in for appendix. He went in for he had something on his foot one time. I forgot what it was. Something on his foot.
It was because he was diabetic?
He was a diabetic who overdosed on insulin all the time. Well, take another shot, then we can go out to eat. So it was, I mean, he did not take care of himself, and once he had the trach, it didn't make any difference. We'd go someplace and he would tell somebody something, they'd talk right over him because they couldn't hear him that well. So from there he just stayed home and and for the last 3 years he just stayed home, and you could see he had the television on, but he'd sort of say like, hurry up, God, take me, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up.
That's sad.
So when he did die, it was more of a blessing for both of us. In fact, the day he died, I don't know if I told you, I had a fish tank at that time, and I had gotten tired of it, and because I was working crazy hours, so I tried this girl, Joanne, to come over, and she had fish, and I said, I have this fish tank. I said, I'm going to get rid of it. So she came over. It was on a Sunday, and Mel had called me a Saturday night to pick up some medicine at the drugstore, at Jewel, a prescription. So I got it, and I came home, and when I got home, at 2 o'clock in the morning, he said, be careful going into the bathroom. He said, I couldn't clean it up. He said, I had a problem, couldn't clean it up. And so I said, okay. So it wasn't too bad, so I cleaned it up, and I went to bed. And he never got up until 3 or 4 in the afternoon anyhow. So Joanne came over, and we talked and socialized all day, and she finally took the tank home. And I never bothered Mel until 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and then, if you want something to eat. So after she left, I went in to see if he was on it, and he was gone. And that was it.
So how did that change your life? What changed for you after that?
Oh, it was great, because then I didn't have to hurry home. I didn't have to, I could be me.
Do you feel like that was maybe the first time in your life you've been able to do that?
Oh no, a lot of times it was a case of I could do whatever I wanted to. It was just a matter of making him happy, as opposed to, if he's going to rant and rave about it, which he did. I could come and go, like I could travel all over the country if I wanted to, and I did. But a lot of times, I couldn't have people in the house. When we first got married, my girlfriends would come to the door, and I'd be right out. I could not have people in the house. If they were in the house, he would either slam the bedroom door. He wouldn't say anything.
Why? Why was he like that? What was his reason for that?
I don't know.
So, did you have good female friends then while you were married? Like, would you have female friendships?
I had female friends, but they all stayed outside. They never came in the house.
Who would you say was your best friend? As an adult woman, maybe, in
Shirley Rockford was very good. Yeah. We had the whole block. We would take our chairs and sit outside. Shirley would go down to the corner, and she was a baby, she was walking, and my kids never crossed the street. They knew you stop at the street. So I never had to worry about them running out. Shirley would go down to the corner, and one day I lost her. She disappeared. She wouldn't come back. So I went down to the corner. Here she is, laying in the corner of a building, sucking your thumb.
Surely. Okay, so we're in the early 90s now. You're a widow. And when did you meet Jim?
Oh, I met Jim.
Well, you knew Jim, but first of all, explain how you and Jim were connected before you got married.
Jim married Charlotte, my sister-in-law.
Mel's sister.
Mel's sister.
Yes.
And when she died, of course, we went over for the funeral, and later on, Jim was going to go someplace, and he said there was a gambling place. I think it was a gambling. And he asked me if I wanted to go. So I said, yeah, it was in Elgin, I think. I said, I'll meet you there. So Ross, Jim's son, was there also with his girlfriend. So we did our thing, and then I go to leave, and Ross gives me a hug, and the girlfriend gives me a hug, and Jim looks at me and he came over and gave me a hug. This was the first time we ever touched, because when we go places, I would stay my distance, and he would too. And so then when I got home, I'm thinking a little later on, I said, it's very interesting. And so I said, how would you like to come over and have dinner one night with me? So he took the train, came in, and he had dinner. And then I took him to the train station in Mount Prospect. And we sat in the car until the train came, and just before the train came, he leaned over, gave me a kiss, and ran. And the next day, I got a dozen roses, and the thing said he had a very nice time, In fact, I have, the cards and everything.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So after that, then J.C. Penney was having a fundraiser, and we were going to walk through Bussy Woods. It was a 5-mile walk or something like that. So Jim went with me, and that was the beginning.
And so how long were you dating, if that's the right term for it, before you guys get married?
2 or 3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks? And how was the proposal? Did he propose to you, or?
It was a sort of a mutual thing.
Yeah.
And so that was it.
And so what day did you get married, and what year?
I got married in 98, I think, in May. I forgot the date. I have it marked on the calendar, but that's it.
And so I remember that, May 1998, and you were really happy with him.
We had fun. We had a good time.
What were some good things about him that you remember?
It was just nice. I mean, we did things together. Mel never did stuff with me. We went out and built snowman because I was only married for a short time. We built snowmen in the winter, and we rolled in the snow. We did all sorts of stuff. Of course, he couldn't drive because his eyes were bad, and his ear, and he couldn't hear a lot. So it was just one of those things. No, we had a nice time.
That's good.
And then, of course, Ross was there too. Now Ross lives in Arkansas, I think. But he called me one day not too long ago when he heard I was going to put my house up for sale, and he said, if I have anything of his father's, could he have some of it? So I said, well, I don't know what I have right now, but if I give, so that's it.
And so when did Jim pass away? Was it the end of 98 or early 99?
Well, we got married in 98, so it would have been 99 in August. August he got married.
And so 99, and then we go into 2000. How did his death impact you? Like, how did that change things for you?
When we were only married 5 months when he developed a brain tumor, and they said that he'll be gone within a year. And in order for me to collect his Social Security, we had to have been married 9 months. We were only married 5 at that time. But he lasted for 15 months. So I got his Social, because Mel's Social Security was practically nothing. When I got Jim's, it doubled. If I had not married Jim and had said no, I'd have lost everything by now.
Yeah.
I mean, my Social Security was something like $25 less than Mel's. And Mel's was something like $600. And when I got married to Jim, it started out 12. So,
So in the 90s, I'm going to go back to politics just for a second. Did you vote for Clinton in 92 or George H.W. Bush or Ross Perot?
I think I did Perot that year.
Perot?
Yeah.
You went independent. I like it. I
mean, I was never impressed with Hillary. Neither is Adam.
Well, let me jump ahead. Well, no, we'll get to that later. So you weren't impressed with Hillary. That's totally okay. So okay, so the '90s, you get married to Jim, and then you weren't married very long. Jim passes away, and then we're in the 2000s. What year did you skydive?
What?
What year did you skydive?
When I was 82.
So
So,
let's see, 28. So maybe 2010?
I don't know.
Yeah, because you're 92.
Yeah, I did it when I was 82, yeah.
So in the early 2000s, you're a widow again. What is your life like then, after that?
My life is fine. I have no problems with that. I've gone out a couple of times with different men, but that was it. It was no big deal. And I'm okay.
What's dating like in that time? Like in that time of your life, going out on dates with people? Is that
Boring.
fun?
Boring.
It's boring? What's boring about it?
I mean, it's just that sometimes they tell me what they like. They're going to they do this or they do that, and I just found that I wasn't really interested in it.
Do you know that people today date online and they meet each other online?
Oh yeah, Adam meets them all.
Oh, he does. What do you think of that as someone that grew up, completely without this type of technology?
It's scary.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, to me, you meet people in a group. You volunteer to do. You go to like the VFW hall or anything at the rec center, the LA Fitness. You meet them that way. But online, I'm uncomfortable. I mean, I think I'd be uncomfortable with it.
So another question I have is, this is interesting. So you were born in 1928 and it is now 2020. You have seen so much changes in society. What do you think of the evolution of how we've gotten to the internet? So radio was the entertainment, then it was TV, right? And then we have this internet, and now that's, where everything is concentrated on this internet. What do you think of that as someone that's seen it unravel?
I think we're in for a problem.
Yeah. So what are the negatives to technology that you've seen and the positives?
Well, the negatives are if you go on Facebook, everybody wants to be your friend. Everybody, and some people automatically, yeah. Unless I know who you are on Facebook, I do not take you as a friend. Mm-hmm. It's not my thing. And I don't say things on Facebook, at least I try not to, that people will argue with. I have a lot of crazy friends on Facebook that are, they do their own thing, which is fine, but I don't have to participate. In fact, lately I've been looking at Facebook and thinking, okay, this one is okay, but this one, I don't want to unfriend anybody, because I remember when Donnie, Billy unfriended me. Because Billy was something else again.
Yes, he was. What are some positives, though, that you've seen with technology? It doesn't have to be the internet, just as you've seen the evolution of technology. What are positives that you think of?
What can I think of positives? You watch television and all you hear is what the news broadcasts are. The weather's going to be this, the weather's going to be that, the weather's going to be that. I'm so tired of hearing about the weather, and they're not always right. They tell you it's going to be sprinkles, it'll snow. They tell you it's going to sun, it's going to rain. It's like, it's. I don't think a lot of them know what they're talking about.
Do you think that technology has made your life easier?
In some ways, yeah. And in some ways, no. Sometimes you don't need technology, because technology will not make you grow. Sometimes you need something that you have to figure out yourself.
What do you think was the most influential piece of technology that you've seen in your life?
Cars.
Cars?
Cars.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you've really seen them completely change.
Well, I mean, we had a Model A Ford when Mel and I got married. Now, he didn't know how to open the hood at all. He did not know you did anything but put gas in the car. He never didn't know how to put water in the car, oil, or anything. So we had that. I had the first Jeep that came out of the Army. We had that, which was a boy catcher like you wouldn't believe in those days.
I bet. That must have been fun for you.
Yeah, it did cost a lot of stuff there.
Speaking of cars, so do you remember? So you would have had cars that didn't have seatbelts.
Who had a seatbelt? Nobody had a seat. Yeah, you had the baby in the car and you held your hand like this so they wouldn't fall.
Like even like a baby, like 6 months old, you just.
Yeah, I mean, my kids never had baskets to sleep in.
So do you remember when seatbelts came out? Was that kind of like a novelty or something odd?
Those seatbelts came out what?
The 50s, I think. Late 50s? I
don't know. I mean, I never had a seatbelt on my car until I got this last one. And mine's 13 years old now, so I don't remember having seatbelts.
So being born in 1928 and growing up as a woman, do you feel that the year you were born, like, limited you to what you could have done as a female?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, at that time, you listened to your parents. You didn't argue with them. And I wanted to do certain things, and that's not, the girls don't do stuff like that. I mean, remember one time I had to take a car into the garage for some repair work. My dad would not let us go in. He says, I'll take that in. Girls don't belong there. So, yeah, things have changed. I mean, some of it, of course, is okay, and some of it isn't.
If you could have done, let's say you had no limitations in society as a female at this time, if you could have done anything you wanted career-wise, what would you have done if there had been no limitations?
Probably going to be an astronaut now.
Yeah.
I mean, I find I like science a lot better than a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But when I got out of school, you could be a nurse, you could be a school teacher, or you could be a secretary. That's it. There wasn't anything else. And then, of course, you had the parents that said, no, this is not this, or you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And because like I was, after I got out of school, and I found out that I could join the service, that I could get an education. I got static on it.
Me.
Hi.
How we
Good.
doing?
I need help.
You have to do that.
How do
for
you
her.
put the filter back in? And tell me how.
Okay.
I mean, show me how.
All right, let me get my stuff. She's got a good habit of
There-
that. Are we
there's
still,
a-
are we still
there's a-
taping?
We're recording,
Take
it's
the
okay.
red, the
I know,
thing.
you got my seat.
Take the red back.
Yeah.
This is for the family records. It's okay.
This is what I do. I come
Wait,
in.
hold on. Wait, this is Shirley
Hi.
for the family
I
record.
come in and she says, I need help. Before I take my coat off, or put my purse
Well,
on. Let me get my glasses on.
all right. She has to have her glasses on her.
So you might have been an astronaut. What else do you think you would have liked?
What else? I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be a teacher. I couldn't get it in. I mean,
I don't know how you took it out, so.
I tried it.
I'm assuming that this thing goes, the tab goes like this.
Probably. Yeah, I
You
think
push
so.
it in that way.
But there.
I remember I had a little trouble last time, so.
Oh.
I mean, I had to put it in and out.
Yeah, because I've been playing with it for an hour.
I fiddled with it too, and I felt like I was forcing it.
I wonder if it goes.
I even got out the book to look at.
Yeah, that's how I did it last time I did the book. Let me have the book.
All right, so I got one last question.
Go sit down there if you like. You can sit on the chair there, and there's a lamp there. You can turn the lights on.
So, as someone that's 92,
Yeah.
what do you think of the year 2020?
I've had a lot of indoor stuff.
Well, okay, so let's backtrack. Let me backtrack before we come fully into 2020. What do you think of Donald Trump as president?
Donald Trump thinks he's perfect. He never makes a mistake. To my knowledge, everybody makes mistakes. That's how you learn. And Donald Trump does not make a mistake, so he's not ever going to learn.
That's well said.
I mean, it's just the way he is.
What do you think of how do I phrase this? What do you think the biggest impact of his presidency has been on the United States?
People being bullying, teaching people how to bully, because bullying was never a heavy, it wasn't as prominent as it is now.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody bullies. Did you get it?
I think so. I'm going to check it.
So in 2020 we've had this coronavirus pandemic, which
Yeah.
we're currently in right now. How would you compare that to other like public health crises? So like you grew up with remember when polio was a problem.
Polio was, Alvin ended up with the polio.
So-
I don't know if Alvin actually had polio, but that's part of why he has a limp now. 'Cause
He had
had
something.
How do you
He
think
had something. I don't think it was polio though.
How do you
You
think
know.
that this current pandemic, have you seen any other, is this the worst thing you've seen as far as public health, or?
Well, I haven't seen anything. I mean,